Hi, I'm Dan Cox, and this is your MMA update. Joined as always with my partner, Bomb. Bomb, how you doing, buddy?
Great, brother. How are you?
I'm reeling. There's so many things I want to talk about, but I want to touch on this Reebok policy. What's happening? The numbers are come out. They're announced. I mean, you've got fighters that are literally making $2,500 if they're 5 fights or less in the UFC. This is changing the game. It really is. 98% of what I'm hearing from the fighters is negative. These guys are losing big money. I mean, but what's your take on it, Bomb? I mean, I don't see the benefit at all other than the UFC. And what was it, 25 million at one point, and it went up to 70 or whatever? What do you see happening here?
Well, the speculation on it is it could be worth up to 70 million. That's a far cry from the 25 they first announced. So somebody's not telling the whole truth here, and it leads us back to the same thing we talked about before, where the UFC is a privately traded company. They don't have to divulge that kind of information. They're only going to tell you what they want you or I to hear. Someone like Tim Kennedy, perfect example, said it the best. $2,500. You know what? My exclusive Reebok deal is $2,500. Why don't you keep that $2,500?
Yeah.
Because, like you said, 98% of these fighters who are, saying that it's a bad deal, not liking the deal, 98% of those guys are also the same guys coming out and saying they can do better themselves with their own sponsors than with the Reebok deal. So, for me, it sounds more like they're being forced into this, take it or leave it sponsorship deal. And they're not allowed to bring their own sponsors in, obviously, during fight week or fight night. So somebody like Uriah Faber, for instance, like we talked about, who owns his own clothing line, isn't going to be able to have his own clothing line that sponsors him during fight week or in the cage. It's going to hurt the guy's pockets. I mean, he's a little bit higher up on the ladder of what Reebok's going to give, a fighter. But it's still not in comparison with what he's going to make from his own apparel company.
Well, listen,
so those guys, being strong on it.
Yeah, and those guys, a lot of those guys were getting 6 figures as far as sponsorship goes. So I mean, even the champ is going to fight and make like 40 G's or something as a sponsor. But it's funny. Speaking of Uriah, I know that his manager and basically almost all the managers for MMA are going to a meeting that they're having in Vegas next week to discuss, amongst other things, but mainly to discuss this Reebok deal and what's happening. Now, for me, when I look at it, it just is the worst thing for the fighters. I mean, what we do at LUB is we try to help and sponsor these fighters and change the way they're paid and looked at. This is going the opposite direction for me, and I kind of take it personal. I mean, a lot of these fighters are going to have to think about not just the UFC, but now money. And that's going to open the door like we had seen and we had spoke about before with Scott Coker and Bellator. He's a smart man, regardless of what happened with Strikeforce. Scott Coker's a smart man. You cannot underestimate him. And the UFC just handed him a golden ticket. And he seems to be playing it right, in my mind. I think there's going to be a lot of fighters, as their contracts expire. Uriah Faber, perfect example, owns Torque. That's his clothing line. He can't even use his own to come in the gym with. So when his contract's up, he's going to go over somewhere, Bellator, I would assume. And the UFC has a chance to match the offer. But how do you match the offer if you don't allow sponsors? I guess, Bob, I want to know, what do you think is the good point for this, for the fighters? Is there any good point? It takes away the individuality of the fighter, they're all looking the same. And I just don't see the benefit at all. I do not see the benefit saying that it makes it like baseball or like football or basketball because of uniforms and stuff. I don't see that at all. I think that is, that's just, it's ridiculous to me.
Well, the benefit for the UFC is they're gonna make it like a professional, company, like an NFL team. So if they ever do decide to sell to maybe like a Premier League owner overseas or something, then it looks like a more reputable company with everybody in the same uniforms and everything else. As far as that goes, with the fighters, the benefit for the fighters could be to leave the UFC, go to a different promotion, make as much money as they can with, pay-wise and with sponsors. Because Scott Cook is not going to handcuff anybody to one sponsor.
No.
So he's going to allow these guys to make as much money as they possibly can with the sponsors they bring. And it won't only open the door for Bellator, but it's going to open the door for other promotions too, like World Series of Fighting, ONE FC, because with the big name fighters comes more money. So the UFC, for me, I'm looking at it as they kind of shot themselves in the foot.
Yeah.
Because if I'm a big name guy, like if I'm for instance, if I'm a Cain Velasquez, I'm not going to take $40,000 from a Reebok sponsorship when I'm making $100,000 from all my other sponsorships. It's a crock. And the UFC's explanation to that and the defense of that is, well, they don't have to get rid of their sponsors. They just can't have those sponsors around during fight week and during fight night.
Yeah.
That's really the only time the fans and the public really get to see these people. So that's a moot point. The UFC knows what they're doing. These guys and girls that are dedicating their lives to the sport that you and I like to watch are ultimately the ones that are getting screwed in the end.
I mean, there's no other way of saying it. It just, to me, is, there's something that doesn't make sense. I mean, listen, they made a bad deal when they did the Fox deal, in my opinion. Reason being, yeah, they got on the big broadcast. They hit the big stage, so to speak. But in 2014, I think they put out like 46 events. So you end up with watered down cards. Van Vis deal with Reebok, and it just seems like bad decisions all the way around. Because now it's not only going to affect the fighters that they have on their roster, but the fighters that are coming into the MMA, the Ed Ruths, people like that, who actually he's going to the Olympics, but he already signed with Bellator, and one of his reasons was the Reebok deal, sponsorship. So it's going to affect the talent that's coming to the UFC as well. And I don't know how they get around this without changing it up somehow. They have to add some incentive, something for the fighters to be able to benefit, because right now, I mean, I would say 98%, I would say every one of them, if they were honest, would be unhappy about the deal, the sponsorship deal. Because you got guys that are going from making six figures in sponsorships to 40, 30, 20, all the way down the line. And it's shocking. It's shocking to me. It's control, and it's something that I've kind of reached my peak of being able to take it. Controlling everything. And that's the one thing the UFC has been great at doing. They control it all.
Yeah, I mean, the smartest guy as of late is Phil Davis. Got out of his contract there, didn't re-sign, let go, whatever you want to say. He's over at Bellator now. He's the smartest guy on the entire roster. And like you said, with the 98% or 100% of fighters, if they're honest, they have to tell you, if they're honest, that they're not happy with the deal, period. And they would probably be contemplating not re-signing with the UFC once their contract expires. Because what are you going to do? You're going to sign another long-term deal or another long fight deal, a 5-6 fight deal, being handcuffed to that one sponsorship deal? I mean, this Reebok deal is for 5 years. So it's not like it's going away anytime soon. It's for 5 years. And 5 years is a long time for a fighter. I mean, that could be 10 fights, 12 fights. So depending on what you're going to sign for a contract, do you really want to spend your next 6-fight deal handcuffed to the one sponsor? I know I wouldn't, especially if I had the capabilities to make myself, 6 figures, high 6-figure, sponsorship deals with all these different sponsors out there. Like someone like Tapo. I feel bad for someone like Tapo, who's come in, dedicated their entire brand to the UFC, basically to be backdoored, to let Reebok come in and take everything away from them that they've built, which those guys, props to those guys, they built that company out of the back of their trunk in their car, in a parking lot, before every fight. They went, they sold, they worked hard, they got to where they were, and now the rug got pulled from underneath them, so to speak. If I was tap out, I would go sign deals with Bellator, with World Series of Fighting, with ONE FC, and I would distance myself from the UFC, because the UFC, in all reality, is only concerned about the UFC. And it's obvious with this deal, because like I said to you previously when we talked before, you don't go and sign a deal like this for 5 long years. Say it's only a $25 million deal, and you're not making $1 off of it. And then for it to come out that it's potentially worth $70 million, there's a big difference there. It's almost $50 million that's being swept under the rug somewhere. So if they're not making $1 off of it, where's the rest of that money going, and where did that figure come from? That's my question.
Exactly, and like you had said before, they don't have to disclose. So that what they've disclosed is the best, right? That is the best they've got. The rest they're not disclosing is because if this is not going over, you can imagine what would happen. And let's be honest, these fighters, yes, they want to fight the best. Yes, they want to be the best in the world, but they have to pay their bills. At the end of the day, they've got to take care of their families. They have to be able to survive. And it comes down to business sense. Like the UFC, they're making this decision based on their business, right? The fighters, they are their own brand. They have to make a decision based on what's best for them. And I just don't see this deal going anywhere but down. UFC is going to have to step in and throw money at these guys somehow, some way, in order to keep it there. Because I think this could be a big shift in MMA, where the UFC has just been so dominant. And they're going to remain dominant. But I think this opens a door for the Bellators to really start to gain traction. And once that happens, all bets are off. I mean, Viacom is a pretty big outfit. They definitely have money to spend. So it's going to be interesting for me. I'm really curious to see how it goes, you know?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised one bit to see these guys start signing contracts with the UFC that aren't exclusive fight contracts. That, you know, they can have a fight, in the UFC, and then 3 months later they can go have a fight in Bellator or, wherever they please. I wouldn't be surprised to see agents and managers and fighters start pushing that, because, hey, let's face it, why would you indenture yourself to one company like that for the minimum amount of money that you can make when you can go make the maximum amount somewhere else?
It doesn't make sense, because literally you could go to that organization, you could bank some money, you could get experience, fight lower quality opponents, no disrespect, but it's a fact. So you're padding your record, become a champ, make a lot of money, and then go to the UFC to try to fight for the title there as you go to retire or something. I don't know. I'm curious to see how it plays out, but I got to tell you, I think this is something that the UFC should have seen coming. How they didn't recognize it was going to go over, terribly, blows my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand how they didn't see this coming. I just don't get how they think that they were going to announce this news and the public and the fighters were going to be okay with it. I just don't get it.
Arrogance. What can I say? Arrogance. That's the only thing I can think of that would make someone because listen, you're not taking care of the fighters anymore. The way the UFC started, and when I was just a die-hard fan, which I still am, I'm of the fighters, and I will watch all the fights. I don't miss them. But I have to say, I am definitely disappointed is a nice word I guess I could use. But you know what? It is what it is, man. We got some big fights coming up. We got a lot of other topics we got to cover, man. I wish we had more time to hit on it, but I think you said it best, Bum. It comes down to that fact, and they are going to have to make a decision on, do they want to go and make money somewhere? Uriah Faber with his own brand, things like that. I mean, come on,
Well, like I said to you before, a fight career is over in the blink of an eye. They only have a certain amount of time to make as much money as they can, to become successful as they can in the octagon, outside the octagon. So they only have that little bit of time to make what they can to ensure that themselves and their families are going to be taken care of forever. And by basically stunting that. You're taking everything away from these guys and girls, like I said, to dedicate their lives to this. Family time, 3 days in the gym, eating right, spending all kinds of money on food and transportation and, you know, gym equipment and gyms and everything else and trainers. And now you're going to take money right out of their pockets. I mean, for me, I'm looking at it as a happy company, a good company, has happy employees. These fighters are basically the employees of the UFC. If they become unhappy, the company's not going to look good. The fans are going to be unhappy, and the UFC is going to start nosediving.
And you know, listen, when you've got guys that are going to have to start working jobs in order to make ends meet, I think that's when they're going to have to take a look at where they're fighting. You know, bottom line, I think it's going to benefit Bellator. I think it's going to benefit other organizations. I think it's one of the worst moves that UFC's ever done, in my opinion. I'm waiting to see the answer. They've got to come up with something. But man, great time as always, Bob. It's a blast. I enjoy it so much. And hey, you guys, when you're on Twitter, look us up. Do me a favor though, leave a comment, subscribe to our YouTube channel. For LUBMMA, for my brother Bomb, I'm Dan Cox. This is your MMA update.